Hello and welcome to the special edition of ET Now Startup Central. We are in conversation with two partners from one of the most sought after seed accelerators in the world, a startup incubator defined as one of the most powerful by fast company. Tim Brady Adora Cheung, thank you so much for talking to us on ET Now Startup Central. I believe this is your first visit to India, and it's really been chock-a-block with startups in New Delhi, in Bangalore. But take us through your first impressions. I mean, what were you expecting before you came, and did it really stack up? Tim, if you can start.
Sure, it's been fantastic the few days we've been here. The energy from the entrepreneurs, the number of entrepreneurs, it's just been great. It's been fun to be around. We've learned a ton about the Indian market, which is one of the purposes of us coming here, but very impressed with what we've seen so far.
Right. Adora, what are your own?
Yeah, all the entrepreneurs here are hungry, very enthusiastic, really want to build things. And we came to India because we're in the business of helping great entrepreneurs. Right. And obviously India is a growing economy and there are a lot of startups coming out of here. And so, yeah, I think expectations met, if not exceeded. And I've been really impressed with all the ideas that people are working on, especially those working on very India-specific problems.
When we ask people to sort of define India vis-a-vis China or vis-a-vis Silicon Valley, anything that really strikes out for you? One VC recently described India to me, as a combination of China and Israel. But anything that stands out for you about the Indian startup ecosystem versus the other ones globally?
Well, globally, I mean, it might be similar to China.
In the sense that there is a huge domestic...
Yeah, I mean, India is going to be possibly bigger than China in a very short amount of time. And so I think it's prudent for any investor to come investigate. But I think, people here are very much want to work on India-specific problems, like I said, and I think that's very unique in that sense.
Right. Tim?
Yeah, the engineering talent, like there's a kind of a long tradition of
right.
training great engineers in this
right.
country,
right.
And we've seen evidence of that in our visit. I'd also say that while the market's potentially as big as China, it's probably structurally more open, which I think Adora and I have talked about this week. It's just like the long-term potential of that is exciting to us.
Right. And between Delhi and Bengaluru, again, anything that stood out for you between, the quality of startups or the kind of founders that you've met in both cities?
I was going to say, this feels a little bit more like Silicon Valley to us.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Because Bengaluru is, often called India's Silicon Valley. So that's good to hear.
There's a higher concentration of kind of trained engineers, tech people is the way we'd say it, and that was noticeable to us. Both great, the same level of enthusiasm in both cities, and you could feel it. But Bangalore certainly was kind of more tech-oriented.
I was going to say, Delhi is... while Bangalore is more tech-oriented, Delhi is more sales, media, commerce-driven type startups. So
okay.
Major difference.
And in terms of the infrastructure or the ecosystem that's there for a Silicon Valley, what will it really take for Bengaluru to get there? Apart from the obvious ones around the public infrastructure and the traffic and other things.
Yeah, I mean time, right? There is no substitute for time. I mean, Silicon Valley didn't happen overnight. In 2000, right? It's been happening since 1960, right? And so it's been 50 years, 55 years for Silicon Valley to become what it is today. And the amount of time it'll take Bangalore will be much less, but it's still going to take time. And
you spoke about India-specific solutions, but a majority of the unicorns or the ones that get a huge amount of funding, critics often say that these are mental models of the West. That it's also easy for investors to put money into these companies because there is a global playbook available. So do you think that's also a problem here? That increasingly we are seeing many copycats, but not really companies that address the Indian market.
I think copycats for the sake of just copying is not a business. It's not defensible at all. But I don't think the customer cares whether you're a copycat or not. They just care if you're delivering a great service or product.
As long as you're obsessed with your customers.
Yeah, and I think even the ones that are here and people are thinking it's copycat of Amazon or whatever, they've clearly, anything from the payment system to the type of goods that they're selling is very, they have to modify it towards the Indian population, or else they wouldn't exist today. Like, like the Indian customer is not just going to accept anything, right? And so there are modifications to the business model itself as well that many have created. And so the criticism is, it's easy to say, but I think if you look deeper at these companies, they've modified towards the India population.
And is that something that you consciously look at, even when you look at startups for YC, that these are local startups, focused on solving local problems and with local solutions?
Not always. I mean, we look for great teams and unique insights. And many of them, if they come from India, those unique insights will be about the Indian market naturally. But we're looking for those unique insights. And to Adora's point, if it's just a copycat and there's no unique cultural insight, like that's not interesting to us, right? We don't think those companies will win long term.
Right. I also wanted to understand in terms of, the way people view India, some criticism about, the entire country being viewed homogeneously. This is something that Google's Rajan Anandan raised as well. He said that, a majority of the population, they don't really have the spending power to spend online or, to spend on consumer internet. So again, do you think there needs to be some, differentiation on the markets that these startups address, that perhaps a lot of them are addressing just 5 or 10% of the addressable population?
I think, this is something we'll have to look into ourselves, is what is the addressable market and like who can actually pay for things and so on and so forth. But, I think if you look at the economy itself, it's growing. The income per capita is growing too as well. The middle class is growing. And I think, again, it's going to be one of the biggest countries. It is one of the biggest countries already in the world, maybe the biggest country in the world very soon. And so I think in the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to see that per income capita grow and middle class income grow and people being able to afford things at a higher scale grow. So as long as a company has a 5 to 10 to 20-year outlook and wants to build an everlasting company, those are the founders we look for, is they want to build an everlasting company, then they should be totally fine. Like we're totally fine in them riding the wave of India. And I mean, you can look in China, like Alibaba came in at a time when, many people didn't see that going big. And so I think you'll see a lot of the companies today become the next Alibabas of India, for example.
But do you think, Tim, that China also has an advantage because, companies there are almost protected by the regulations? India that way has a much more level playing field. I mean, Amazon couldn't win in China, but they have a very good chance of winning in India. So again, is that a disadvantage for Indian startups? What's your own take on that?
Tough question. It probably in the short term, it's a disadvantage.
That funding alone will not help you.
That protectionism is kind of at least from my vantage point, is kind of a short-term thing, right? But competition over the course of time will make all companies better, right? And if the Amazons of the world can't adopt the local market well, someone's going to come in and beat them to the punch. And I think that's better. It makes stronger companies and it's better for the consumer, right? And so companies or countries that are heavy protectionist, over time, I think we'll have a tough time competing globally.
Right. And I just want to understand, what kind of information does Y Combinator really absorb to understand the Indian market better? I mean, founders and investors born and raised in India are getting criticized because, they're not able to segment the market and really sell to the population here. So, sitting in the valley, what kind of information are you using to understand India better, to invest in the right startups?
We certainly invested in some of the growing top entrepreneurs in India, and so we talk to them a lot. Our newest partner, Anu, just joined our growth fund, and she's from here, and she's an expert in the field as well. So it's just a lot of research and talking to people, and just one of the reasons for us showing up here is to be here and learn more about it. And so Tim and I are not like super experts in India quite yet, but I think we're certainly on our way to becoming one.
Okay. And you want to add to that, Tim?
Yeah, I was just going to say, our screen for working with companies is the first screen as great founders, right? So even when we don't know a market very well, which India falls into that category, we know what questions to ask, right? We've kind of honed that, and so during an interview, during our application, we'll ask those questions like, "What have you considered this?" And we learn through that. We learn about the Indian market through that. And if founders don't have great answers about segmentation or whatever, we won't choose to work with those folks, right? So we learn through the companies we end up working with, and we know what we don't know, and we know how to ask the question to find out.
Right. If I look at YC's India portfolio, I think there are 7 so far, right? I mean, if I count HackerRank from 2011. But is there a common theme across these companies? I mean, a couple of them are in fintech. One caters to farmers. So very diverse set of startups. But is there a common theme to all of them? If you can just
great founders.
Okay.
A great founding team, right? People in it for the long haul, solving important problems, all with unique insights into the market they're going after.
That comes down to the founder.
That both of you keep saying, right?
It's the number one criteria that we look at for anybody we bring in. It's something
more important than the idea also.
Oh yes, because ideas change all the time, especially because we invest in early stage companies. Some people have barely even launched yet, and so just from our own experiences, we know that things change.
Right.
And so it really matters is the founder, are they intelligent? Can they communicate well? And do they have perseverance? There's going to be so many obstacles thrown in front of them. Are they going to be able to, recover and jump across all of them?
And, in India, at least in the last couple of years, there's been so many accelerators coming here. MNCs, multinationals who are bringing their accelerators in. Not just tech companies, you even have banks opening up incubation centers, to understand the disruptions in banking better. So in this market, how does YC stand out? Of course, apart from the YC brand, the YC stamp, anything specific that you believe YC can bring for entrepreneurs in India?
Yeah, we've been doing it the longest. I think Paul and Jessica, who started YC, were really the first ones, at least in this incarnation of what an accelerator is. It's kind of, they've defined the market, and they've been doing it the longest. Consequently, we have the biggest alumni network, and increasingly that is a big asset. One of the things we do at YC is culturally is to kind of foster this feeling of family and trust, and paying it forward and helping one another. And so as that alumni network grows, it's a giant asset that we can bring to all our founders.
And both of you also have a background in entrepreneurship. You were in the on-demand space, and you were in the online education space. Again, does that play a role when you look at startups? Is there a positive bias, a negative bias, say, for or against startups in the education space, or do you gravitate towards startups in the on-demand space? How does that work?
I think we.
There's a house joy in India.
Yeah, I know. I think we know how to evaluate them very, very well, and I think we look at the opportunities there and look at the founders, and so there might be some biases, but they're not ever more positive or more negative for any company. I mean, in terms of the on-demand space, we still take on those sorts of companies, but we just know the business model a lot better, which is better for everybody, and so we know. Is that a
business model that you think can work in India? Because there's been a lot of criticism against hyperlocal and on-demand because the unit economics are not that viable. But you think there's a chance that it can?
Oh yeah, I think the customers want it. They want the convenience, and they want the product and services. I think what we've gone ahead of ourselves and what we've learned over time, the business model that doesn't work is price wars. And when you're an early stage company and you get into a price war game, it basically comes down to who raises the most money, and you focus less on quality and more on growth.
Right.
And so I think a lot of people have learned from that, and so I think the next generation of on-demand companies will be much more successful.
Okay. Anything that interested you in the education space, Tim?
Well, I'm still learning the Indian education system, which is unique unto itself. So it's hard to evaluate at this point. But I've met a handful of great ed tech entrepreneurs that I'm excited about. We did office hours today at Imbibe's office, And I got to spend some time with that team and learn about what they're doing, which is really, really exciting.
Okay. So going forward again, what are you going to look for in India? I mean, I know you're sector agnostic, but again, anything that that excites you, because there's been a lot of interest around fintech because it's still evolving and people expect technologies like UPI to really disrupt the market. So anything that interests you within India, any particular sector that you believe has huge potential going forward?
Well, I think ed tech has a lot of opportunity, whereas in the U.S. a lot of the focus and the attention is spent on fixing an old broken system.
Right.
And in India there's not much of a system yet, so you have more of an opportunity to kind of almost start from scratch. Well, that's not completely true, but a lot more so than the U.S. And so I think the thinking is fresher than the ed tech thinking in the States, and I think they're thinking bigger and about scale a lot more so than the States.
Right.
That's exciting.
Adora, you tweeted something about misconceptions about YC.
Oh, yeah.
Any 3 misconceptions that you saw here that you've wanted to address as far as Indian entrepreneurs are concerned?
I mean, a lot of entrepreneurs ask me, like, should I apply? Am I ready to apply? All these things. And one of the things that we tell people is, don't even worry, but just apply. Like, the application process is very simple. It's just a few questions,
right.
and it's a really good way to think about your business in the first place.
Right.
But I mean, some people have applied and gotten rejected and stuff like that. But I mean, in the last batch, nearly 50% of the people got rejected previously.
So there's no stigma against
Yeah, there's none. If
yeah.
anything, we your previous application, we see the progress you've made, and it makes it even better. And so yeah, I think everyone, if you're running a startup early stage, you should come apply and see what happens.
And how do you really evaluate how successful your startups are? Any 2 or 3 metrics that you look at?
Kind of the high level goal is to have like a profound impact on society, right? We think entrepreneurship is good for society, right? And that's kind of why we love doing what we do. In the short term, we help companies get funded, right out of the program, and so we pay attention to that metric, right? Because if they're able to raise money, that gives them a much greater chance at having that impact.
Right.
And then we continue to stay in contact with all of our alumni and measure how they're doing over the course of time.
Right. One pro tip that both of you can give me on how an applicant can make the cut for YC. Apart from great founding team, which which I'm sure
you want to ourselves.
Clarity, right? Clarity in thought, right? So the mistake a lot, not just Indian applicants, but everyone makes is like, I don't know exactly what to say, so I'm going to say everything, right?
Trying to do 20 things instead of 1.
Right, and it forces us to have to pick out what's important in this long 5-paragraph thing, when you should be the one doing the thinking about what's important and say it very clearly and succinctly. And so if you can do that well, that's a huge advantage in the application process.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the number one thing. Aside from that, maybe it's, if you don't have traction, all things equal, traction is better, but if you're one of those teams that just started building and don't have many users, then really focus in on that one question where it says, how are you going to acquire users, and how are you going to, what's the unique insight there?
In terms of customer acquisition.
In terms of customers, and so, being more thoughtful on that part of the application, so we can kind of dream with you a little bit more on how you're going to make this a big company.
Right. And how many startups have you met in the last 3 days?
Hundreds, I'm sure. I can't count anymore, but all great. I have not been disappointed.
So you have extensive notes to sort of go through now.
Yeah, eventually, yeah.
Okay. Final part of the interview, just some quick questions for both of you. I'm going to start with Tim. Tell me about one aha moment in your career. It could have been, when you were at Yahoo, or, you started your own company, but one aha moment for you.
As one aha moment is like, as a manager in a fast-growing startup, like there's this pitfall just trying to hire fast without hiring well, because you're so busy, and you convince yourself like, if I just have a warm body to help, it's better than having no warm body.
Right.
Right. And so you bring in people that don't necessarily fit or are qualified to do that. but because you're so busy, it feels like it's a positive because you can give them a little bit of work. But over the course of time, it doesn't play out that way. And kind of hiring not great people becomes this huge weight on the company. And the aha moment for me as a manager is when I let my first bad hire go. I felt the rest of the team kind of rise up. They're like, oh, that person's gone.
Literally.
Because everyone's working so hard.
They all need to hire for me.
Because everyone's working so hard, and when someone next to you isn't pulling their own weight, it's a drag on everyone. And as a manager, like, you let that go, and you can just see it in the eyes of the other team members, like, oh, okay, we're back to being like a high-quality A team. And managers make that mistake, but everyone makes hiring mistakes, but the bigger mistake is not to kind of fix it when you do recognize a mistake. And so that was an aha moment for me.
Right. Adora, three mistakes that you've made that other entrepreneurs can learn from.
3? Oh, well.
That's a tougher question. I only had one.
Well, I've made a million, so I got to pick from those. I think one is not taking. I started doing this later, but in the beginning I did not take enough time in my day to really think. So I was just going, building, coding, doing everything. And I think it would have been very helpful if I'd just taken 1 hour of the day just to think about the more macro picture of where my company is going, you know, what's going on and stuff like that. I think another one is when I hired people, was letting go of some of the tasks and hiring people to do stuff that I didn't necessarily wasn't like special, like I wasn't especially qualified to do, but I just had accumulated all that stuff. Letting go as a founder is really hard, but it's something definitely that I should have been doing sooner than later. And the third one is, what's a good third one? I'm drawing blank.
Tim's thinking as well.
Yeah.
Do you have a mistake to add to that?
What's one mistake?
It's not a mistake as much. I think I underestimated the value of great communication to a team, right?
Was this at Yahoo or?
This was at actually every startup I've been to, but I've got is as you, like, when you first start out, it's just a couple of people and you're always on the same page and you're sitting at the same table or in the same room, and communication is easy, right? And you know what the other person's doing, and so you don't invest much in thinking about communication. It just kind of happens naturally. But as the team grows, like, you need to be conscious of doing a good job communicating because it's critical. Right? It's critical to keeping everyone inspired, making sure we're all pulling in the same direction. And, you know, actually with each, you know, I've done a few startups, and in each case, like, I find myself always underestimating it. Like, I always could do more, I always could do better.
Right.
You know, whereas the product of the company is really the output of this handful of, you know, 10 people.
Right.
Like, if they're not pulling in the same direction, just communication can make them pull better. You can get more done. And so I think that's a bit of a.
And
I have the third one. I found my third one. I was trying to rank everything and give you the true top 3. So I spent the first 3 years of my entrepreneurial life just wading through many ideas, and the one thing I noticed the theme was I wasn't working on a problem that I was passionate about, or a problem I actually had myself, or my co-founder had, and so that always ended up like an idea dead on the floor down the road after fully building out. And so I think for entrepreneurs who are starting out and don't have an idea yet, like, really just work on an idea you have. If you don't have one of those ideas, then go work at a fast-growing startup and, you know, find an idea there. And also, it's a good thing because you'll find co-founders there as well if you don't have one.
Final question, one book that you think entrepreneurs should read?
Jessica Livingston's Founders at Work book is really good. It's an interview of many founders in the 90s and early 2000s. It's a go-to book for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a book called The Goal, which talks about kind of streamlining operations. and it's not applicable not just to entrepreneurship but all business. And I go back and read that book every 5 years or so because there's always new things I learn from it.
Great. Thanks so much for talking to us.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/etnow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at etnowlive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/etnow.